Hello and welcome back to another video. Today's topic is a really simple one that I think could actually diffuse a lot of drama, and what I'm going to be talking about is the ability to solo queue bits of content that are not normally solo queuable, mainly raid content, and using a system like this as a replacement for LFR. And the reason I bring this up is because it's something that Star Wars The Old Republic does, and a lot of people speak highly of it there, and I think that it, done right, could actually make everybody in a way happy. There is, however, a massive downside. I'll talk about that at the end, but I'm sure many of you have guessed it already. So often I hear from the pro LFR people that they'd be dissatisfied if they didn't have the ability to see the content that lies within the game's raids. Now, that said, I personally do think that even without LFR, that content is still accessible to everybody. You just have to go and do it, but besides the point, that is a thing that a lot of the pro LFR people say. It's, if LFR's gone, I can't see the raid, I'm not going to play as much of the game. Now, on the flip side, a lot of the people who are against LFR talk about how it undercuts content, it messes up gearing, and due to the legendary quest sort of grind mechanics, it leads to a lot of repetition. And I hear from just about everybody that it's not a great deal of fun in its current form. You pretty much all know what my personal feelings are on the topic, but I think that a solo option can quite literally make everyone who I've described above happy and lead to content that is more fun. So the solo version of a raid would essentially be a raid that is retooled to be killable by a single player. How would this be done? Well, it's going to involve tweaking the design of some of the fights and likely removing a few mechanics at play. To be sure, it would be a bit more work for Blizzard to implement than just throwing on a scale and calling it LFR and that being that. Overall, though, I do think that things could be balanced so that it would be decently difficult for the appropriate gear level. It would be designed as something that you could chip away at from time to time. Not super hard, but also not a complete cakewalk. Now, one of the ways that Star Wars The Old Republic can facilitate for this is that you have companion characters in that game, and your companions can either heal, DPS, or tank. This basically evens out a lot of the inherent weaknesses to some of the classes when it comes to soloing stuff, since everyone can have a tank or healer to help them out and fill out their roster. Currently, WoW doesn't have this feature, however, they seem to have the AI mostly ready because it's actually live and rolling in the Proving Grounds where you can have a healer NPC, so perhaps that could work. From a gameplay standpoint, I think they could make this really satisfying. Soloing old content is already something that's really fun for a lot of people, especially when it comes to pushing the boundaries and soloing stuff that's really quite hard to solo. One thing that you always come up against, though, is that the fights were not designed for a single person, and often that can create a lot of the fun because you're killing something that you technically shouldn't really be able to kill. However, these solo raids would be designed for a single person plus maybe two NPCs, though of course the NPCs wouldn't be required to do the mechanics. And I think this could deliver some really high quality gameplay. They could do things like, say, forcing the player to soak an AoE that lands on one of their NPCs. They can do a lot of the ground mechanics, they can do interrupts, they can do enrages, just various different mechanics, which are still completely doable with one player, and some of the group mechanics like soaking or maybe standing in front of an ability that's going to hit a certain player, that can all be done with the NPC characters in a way that doesn't rely on their AI to actually make the mechanic be fun and work. So while their mechanical scope is a little bit limited there should be enough to work with, and absolutely when it comes to raid design, they are extremely smart and talented people. I think they could definitely make something cool if they wanted to. As far as this mode goes in terms of rewards though, it would drop gear, however that gear I think should be on par with dungeon stuff. I really do believe that a game like World of Warcraft lives and dies on the quality of its group content and how much it can sort of get that social glue between players, so that should always be the best way to go if you want to progress your character. What this mode does, though, is it allows people to see the raid content and get the story on their own time via doing content that I think would be higher quality and more fun than the current LFR mode. Things like Tombs of Chaos wouldn't drop from this mode either, which means that the pre-established raiders wouldn't really feel like they need to grind this out every week. Essentially, this purely exists to let people see that content and chip away at it over time. Yes, there's gear, but if you really want to get into organized raiding, you're better off just doing dungeons and the like. So the people who have defended LFR by saying it's the only way to see the raid content would have that problem solved, but also the people who feel forced to grind LFR for items, or maybe the people who think that LFR hurts the game's overall gearing, well, all of those issues are pretty much solved by a system like this. which is definitely a nice thing. But there is one big problem. World of Warcraft is an MMO. Killing Archimonde by yourself with a few NPCs doesn't feel like the most MMO-ish thing. I can see Blizzard, thinking that the top-end content of a raid tier should always be a group affair, and even though LFR isn't the most cooperative group affair in that it's a bit of a clusterfuck, most of the time, you're still doing that with other people and there's still that spectacle, which I think is something that they think is very strong, and to a degree, I agree, it is a very strong spectacle. While I don't think LFR is fun, it certainly is group content, and the idea of killing a big raid boss without a group of other humans just doesn't really feel like World of Warcraft to me. I suppose in Star Wars The Old Republic, they are designing elements of that game to essentially be playable completely soloable, as if you are playing Knights of the Old Republic. Would that design work in World of Warcraft? I don't know. I think there are lots of pluses, but I'm a little bit hung up on that final negative. There's also the worry that I suppose if you show the people the raid content in a super accessible manner, that it will kill their drive to then get into a raid and experience it at the intended difficulty. That's also a concern. So yeah, with those two concerns, I'm not 100% sure if I would actually like something like this to end up in the game, which is why I suppose I'm throwing it to you guys. What do you think about this system? If you want to talk directly about it, hit up my Twitter. There's a link to that down in the description. But that's pretty much it for today's video. I thought it'd be a pretty fun topic. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.